The new Apple Watch SE 3 comes in two sizes, the 40mm version and the 44mm version. And the question is, which size should you get? Well, today I've got both sizes to compare, show you how they look on my wrist, and I'm also going to show you how WatchOS 26 differs on both models and talk about the pros and cons for each size to ultimately help you decide which size is best. But first, I am giving away this brand new iPhone 17. For a chance to win, be sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and subscribe to my second channel, TechBook by Dion, link in the description. Then comment your favorite feature of the new Apple Watch SE 3 along with your Instagram username, and follow me on Instagram at Dion Schuddeboom, where I'll announce the winner on the 31st of October. Okay, so to start, I want to briefly talk about my recommended spec for the Apple Watch and why I chose it. As with always with the Apple Watch, there are so many different buying options, and you definitely want to make sure you choose the right watch case and band. And in my opinion, this right here is the perfect setup for the SE 3. Let me tell you why. So first of all, as you can see, I decided to go with the midnight color aluminum watch case, and I paired that with the black sports band. Now for the watch case, the reason I chose to go with the dark midnight color as opposed to the lighter starlight color is because the dark color is going to be much more versatile. It's going to look at home both in more formal as well as casual settings, and because it is dark also means that it is going to pair with pretty much any color band that you may want to add, or say outfit that you are wearing. And I think this midnight color in particular is super nice. It's really sleek, where in most lights it will kind of look black, but then in the light this dark undertone, this dark blue undertone comes out and really gives this color a unique touch. And then to pair it with that watch case, I decided to go with the sports band here, also in midnight, and that is of course the perfect color combination to pair with the watch case. And the reason I decided to go with this sports band is because it is super comfortable on the wrist. I've bought this band for years. It is really light, very, very comfortable, and I also like how easy it is to take off and to stay clean. So let's say after a workout, you can simply put it in some water and some dish soap to clean it, and then snap it right back onto your Apple Watch. And again, because it is in that dark midnight color, it's going to look very understated and still at home even in more formal settings. Now the sports band does come in two sizes, so you have the typical more traditional buckle version that I have here, and there's also a solo loop version. Now the solo loop version is nice because it just has one size fits all, but the problem is your wrist size will fluctuate slightly depending on what it is you are doing, or say what time of year it is. So for example, in the summer during a workout, your wrist is going to be a little bit thicker compared to say in the winter, where you'll have a slightly slimmer wrist. And what you can do with this buckle system is super easily resize your watch at any time. And this is something that you can't do with the solo loop variant of this band. So for that reason, I would recommend going for the buckle version for that additional adjustability. So there it is. That is the spec that I recommend for the SE 3. So once again, that's the midnight aluminum watch case with the midnight sports band. And as always, I will leave the purchase links down in the description. Now in terms of price, the two are very similar, so they haven't changed from last year. So the 40mm version will come in at $249, where the larger 44mm version will come in at $279. So the price difference here is really very small, but what I can tell you is that the wearing experience between the two sizes is quite different. Right, so before I show you the watches on my wrist, let's take a look and see how they compare off wrist. And as you can see right away, the difference in size is quite substantial. So the 44mm version here on the right is going to be 4mm taller as well as 4mm wider, so equally larger in both directions. Interestingly, in terms of the thickness, they are identical. So both are going to be 10.7mm on the Apple Watch SE 3. Now this is going to be a little bit thicker compared to the Series 11, which I have here, and I've also done a size comparison video on, which I'll leave linked in the description. But the Series 11 is 9.7mm here on the right compared to that 10.7mm on the SE 3. So on the SE 3, the difference in height and width may sound small, but of course we are talking about a small watch, so 4mm in both directions definitely makes quite a large difference in terms of the overall volume and size that these watches take up on your wrist. And what that's also going to mean is, for example, that the smaller 40mm version will be easier to slide under the cuff. This is especially great, gentlemen, if you are someone who, say, wears suits often. You'll see that that smaller size here will be more easy to slip under, say, longer sleeves, like again a suit or say a sweater. And then in terms of the buttons and controls, they are the same. So the digital crown and side button are going to be the same in size, and the same here goes for the speaker. I've also tested the volumes of the speakers, and these here are the same. In terms of weight, the difference is actually quite substantial. So the 40mm version is going to be the lightest Apple Watch ever at 26.3 grams versus 32.9 grams on the 44mm version. So both are going to be quite a bit lighter actually compared to the Series 11s, but this is a difference that you don't really feel on the wrist. Right, so now let's talk about how each watch wears on the wrist. So for context, I have around 155mm wrist. That is when measured in circumference. That is about 6.1 inches for my American friends. And that should help you put these numbers into context where we can sort of compare your wrist size to mine and see how each model of the Apple Watch will look on your wrist. So right away, as you can see, the difference between the two is quite substantial on the wrist here, the smaller version on my left wrist and the 44mm version here on my right wrist. And something I do immediately notice is how the watch case fits on my wrist. So if we look at the larger 44mm version, you'll see that between the watch case and my wrist, there's only a few millimeters of room on either end. So this is a much bigger watch case on my wrist, where compared to the 40mm version, where there's a lot more breathing room between the watch case ending and say the width of my wrist. And because the 44mm version has a larger watch case, you'll see that the band does stick out a little bit more as it wraps around my arm compared to the 40mm version. So that 40mm version, again, sitting a little bit flush, which will make it easier to say put under a cuff. Now, interestingly though, when I have my hands on the desk sideways, if I rotate my arm, the watch cases do not hit the desk. And this is great because you don't have to worry about scratching your watch case or say making noise. So you don't have that issue on either side. And again, I don't really feel the difference in the weight, but what I do feel is the difference in bulk. So combined with its larger width and height, when moving, when I'm grabbing things, maybe shaking someone's hand, I do feel the 44mm version more on my wrist. It's just more noticeable, where the smaller 40mm version is just less obtrusive, more unobtrusive, and after a little while, you almost forget that you're even wearing it. So at the end of the day, which size is best for you will come down to personal preference, well, and of course your wrist size, but my advice is if your wrist is similar in size to mine, I think ultimately both are possible, but the 40mm version is more proportionate. I think it does look better on the wrist, and especially ladies, you probably have smaller wrists too, in which case this 40mm version will be a little bit more elegant, look more like a timepiece as opposed to say a gadget or a computer on the wrist. But let me know in the comments which one do you think looks best. Okay, so we know that the smaller 40mm version looks best if your wrists are similar in size to mine, but the question is, does the larger 44mm version have some advantages? And well, the answer is yes. Of course, the 44mm version has a larger display, and this means it'll be able to show you more text, more menus at a time, and will make the watch more comfortable to use. So let me show you how WatchOS26 compares on these two sizes. So to start, let's take a look at the watch face. So as you can see, I've pulled up a pretty busy watch face here on both, and you'll see that the data is the same. So both Apple Watches will show 4 complications. So these little data points here in the corners. The watch face itself has the same subdials as well. So basically the amount of data you see is going to be the same. The difference, however, is in the size. So it is going to be more legible, particularly if we look at the complications in the corners here over on the larger 44mm version. And here, by the way, you see my favorite feature of the Apple Watch SE 3, and that's going to be the brand new always on display. This is a huge upgrade, and I'm so glad to see this feature on the SE 3. And then moving on, if we swipe up to check out the Today view, you'll see that on both Apple Watches, we can see 2 cards at a time, so not necessarily more on the 44mm version. And then swiping up here to the home screen, you'll see that we get the same number of applications on both. Again, the corner applications will be a little bit larger on the 44mm version, making it just that little bit easier to access. And let's go ahead and jump into an app. So let's pull up settings here. You'll see that we have the same number of options. The bottom Smart Stack option will be a little bit larger on the 44mm version. Again, a bit easier to access. But if we swipe through, you can see they're remarkably similar. And I think Apple has done a really good job at optimizing WatchOS26 for both the 44mm version, but also the smaller 40mm size. And I think the size difference this year compared to previous years, therefore, isn't as significant as it was, where previously the smaller versions of the Apple Watch SE did feel sometimes a little bit cramped, just a little bit hard to navigate compared to the larger size, where this year, as you can see, that difference is just much less significant. You'll see that yes, text is going to be a bit larger on the 44mm version, but it's not like you're really missing out on the smaller size either. And now I want to pull up a message, as this is always quite interesting, and this is where an area where you do see a little bit of a difference between the two, and where the larger screen size does come in handy. Where, as you can see, I've got the same text bubble here on both Apple Watches, and you can see on the smaller 40mm version, it doesn't fit the entire link, where on the larger version, it does. So you do have to scroll a little bit to fully read the message, where on the 44mm version, it comfortably shows you the whole text. And this is because the display is wider, so therefore it is able to fit more words at a time per line, so you have less scrolling as well, and that will make text easier to read. Of course, the text is also a little bit larger, so at a glance it will be nicer to see. So this here is an advantage for the larger 44mm version, and I think texting here and showing messages is a really good example of that. But that is not to say that it is not readable on the smaller size either. Now, unfortunately, this being the SE3, we don't have any on-screen keyboard, so to respond to a message, you'll just have to use the voice dictation, or you can draw out characters as well, or simply respond with an emoji. I think this works very well. If you do, however, want a on-screen keyboard, you will have to upgrade to a series Apple Watch, like for example, the Series 11. And let me just show you one more app here. Let's jump into the App Store just to give you an overview of how the two compare. So let's load it up here on both watches. There we go. So if we go ahead and open up an application here, and as you can see here, the text formatting, it's going to be a very similar story where both are going to be legible, but it will be a little bit more comfortable on the larger 44mm version. Again, fitting more text on screen at a given time, making it just a little bit more comfortable to read here. Check out how this paragraph compares. The text is also noticeably larger, but again, differences aren't going to be as large as they were on previous models. Okay, so which size is best for who? Well, first of all, it is important to remember that both the 40mm version and the 44mm version have the exact same functionality. So we get the same features, the same performance, and even the same battery life. While yes, the 44mm version will have a slightly larger battery, it also has a larger screen, and that does equate to pretty much the same battery life as on both models, lasting me just about a full day each. And then going back to the question of size, there is no doubt that the smaller 40mm version is going to be the more comfortable watch to wear, the one that I also think looks most proportionate on your wrist, especially if your wrists are similar in size to mine, where on the other hand, the larger 44mm version, while being a bit more bulky, will be the one that is more comfortable to use. So kind of more comfort with usability versus more comfort in wearability, and you can kind of choose which you want to prioritize. Of course, if your wrists are going to be larger, then the 44mm version may be the one for you. But again, I'm really impressed with how good of a job Apple has done with optimizing watchOS here on the SE3, where the smaller SE3 really doesn't feel like a downgrade or feels like I'm missing anything as opposed to the larger 44mm version. And this is great because then you can really make your decision based on which you think looks and feels best as opposed to one based on features and functionality. My advice is, if your wrist is 155mm in circumference or around 6 inches or below, I would go for the 40mm version for just an even more better proportional look. Where if your wrists are on the larger side, then of course the 44mm version may be the best way to go. Let me know if you have any questions at all, and as always, I will leave the purchase links to both Apple Watch models down in the description. And if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend you check out my Apple Watch First Things to Do video. This will show you how to properly set up your watch, unlock all of its features, and also improve the battery life. So I really recommend you do this, and I'll leave that video linked on screen right now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.